Yeah, well, also people need to understand that the season I'm in right now, you're gonna have less. You're gonna have, for example, you're gonna have less joy than you do in the earlier stages. Because, for example, right now, there's nothing I could buy that could give me any sort of any feeling.
Yeah.
Like there's literally nothing, right? And this is what people need to understand. When they hear like, obviously the whole quote you see on Instagram, oh, they say money can't buy happiness, but I'd rather cry in a Lambo than a Toyota. Well, no, that's actually not true, right? Because at least when you're crying in a Toyota, you're crying in a Toyota because you think that you have lack in your life. You're like, I'm crying because I'm in the Toyota. And, once I get to this or that stage of life, then I'll be happy, right? When you're crying in the Lambo or you're crying in the Rolls Royce, you're like, oh, fundamentally, I'm not happy, right?
Yeah.
And which is what people say. But as I said, if people understood joy, fulfillment, and peace, they would understand why they have these emotions, right? So I guess what I'm trying to say is the person who's grinding and just made their first 100K a year, you're gonna get more satisfaction from that than I do at 8 figures a year, because nothing's new. The way I kind of describe it is like, imagine if you lost your sense of taste. You can never enjoy food ever. There's no pleasure you could ever derive from any food ever. You're still gonna go to restaurants, of course you're gonna go, because it's just a part of life, right? But you get no sense of pleasure from it, right? So that's the thing. People look at my life and they're like, oh, he flies private and has these watches and can spend and splurge and whatever. And it's like, yeah, but just understand, you get no pleasure from that. You do it because, of course, it is.
You've normalized it. That's why the pleasure's gone.
Yeah, of course.
Once you normalize it, you've accentuated, like you say, into the next season of your life. So you're looking essentially for those next goals that give you that next part where you do feel like, the first time you buy a jet in the future or something like that, you'll probably feel something then. But by the time you bought your 7th one, you're not going to feel it as much as when you bought your first one.
Yeah, I mean, look, the first time I flew first class, it was crazy. Like it was an amazing experience. By the 80th time you've flown first class and you get the little sliding door, like I mean, or you get one of the if you're flying with Singapore, or you're flying with Etihad, the suites. It's cool the first time, but once you've done it X amount of times, first time you fly private, it's cool. Once you've done it X amount of times, it's But for example, the first time I actually buy my own jet. I'm not at a stage right now where I could buy a jet, and I have my company branding on this. That'll give me a lot of pleasure. Once I've upgraded to my from the Challenger 350 to, let's say, whatever, a larger plane, yeah, of course, I'll get a pleasure from the first time, but once you do it X amount of times, then there's no feeling they can give you. And that's why you've got people like Dan Bilzerian, who's like, yeah, at some point I want to go work at Walmart, because he's trying to like sort of wipe the slate clean, right? And I've thought about this as well. I'm like, oh, maybe I should like fly economy so that way I appreciate first class more. And then I'm like, I mean, I could, but it's also just not sensible, right? Like in the same way, a wealthy person could go from flying, private to, doing economy, right? Just to like reset. But it's also like, no, you work hard so that way, the reason people fly, the reason I fly in Europe like private jet, private or, long haul first class is because it does bring a comfort to your life. And it makes my life easier, and it makes it easier for me to do the bigger things and the harder things that I want. But it's definitely just, as long as people know going into it, they won't bring you any extra sense of joy, then, just go into it with your eyes open is all I'm saying.